can see her there. She's been previously convicted of abusing a Muslim woman. Now, Trump's retweeting has given Franzen a huge boost in followers. She went from having a little more than 50,000 followers on Twitter to over 80,000 in just one day. Now, Trump isn't directly following her or the group, and we don't really know exactly what his link is to Britain First. But what's clear here is that he is giving them a much bigger voice.
And this is not the first time that the American president has been linked to white supremacists.
No, Phil, not even a year into his presidency, this is beginning to look almost like a part of a bigger pattern, of a bigger picture. Let me give you some examples. After the deadly white supremacist rally in Charlottesville in the summer, Trump retweeted white nationalist and well-known debunked as fake news. And the Dutch embassy in the US posted this message on Twitter saying, "Facts do matter. The perpetrator of the violent act in this video was born and raised in the Netherlands. He received and completed his sentence under Dutch law." And beyond that, Dutch media also reported yesterday that the attacker in that video is not even Muslim. Now, of course, there's much outrage out there at this incident. The issue has even attracted the attention of the UN, where the top human rights official today has condemned what he described spreading hatred through tweets. He didn't refer directly to Trump, but he was clearly hinting at this incident.
OK. Federica Baggio, thank you. This is DW News. Still to come, the man responsible for Gladiator and a host of other iconic Hollywood films turns 80. We'll take a look at the life and career of British film director Ridley Scott. We'll have that and more of the day's world news, sport and culture in just a moment.
The fallen colossus. The Deutsche Bank has been branded a dangerous bank and fined billions. It's struggling to regain its credibility. Now, for the first time ever, the executive level opens its doors to journalists. And the top managers respond to the question, how dangerous is Deutsche Bank?
In 45 minutes on DW. It's all about the moments that lie before us. It's all about the stories inside. It's all about your chance to discover the world from different perspectives. Join us and be inspired by distinctive Instagrammers. At DW Stories, a new topic each week on Instagram. Your children like chocolate? You can't live without your smartphone. Do you buy your tomatoes in the supermarket? As we go about our daily lives, human rights are often the last thing on our mind.
From Berlin, I'm Phil Gale. Our top story at this hour, the European Union and the African Union have agreed an emergency plan to evacuate thousands of migrants stranded in Libya. The agreement came at the end of a two-day summit in Ivory Coast and follows recent revelations of slave trading in Libya. Pope Francis has become the first pontiff to visit Bangladesh in more than 30 years. He began his visit by urging the world to take action on the Rohingya refugee crisis, but once again did not mention the Rohingya by name. Now, in Sweden, more than 50 winners of the so-called Alternative Nobel Prize have read out a letter of protest to the Azerbaijan government. At the Azeri embassy, demonstrators called for the journalist Khadija Ismailova Ismailova to be allowed to leave the country. She and 3 others are due to be awarded the Alternative Nobel Prize at a ceremony in Stockholm tomorrow. Ismailova is currently under a travel ban linked to a suspended sentence, and she says she received the ban for criticising the government. Originally known as the Right Livelihood Award, the prize is for courage and excellence in fields not recognised by the mainstream Nobel Award. And one of this year's 4 winners is Colin Gonsalves. He's a human rights lawyer from India. Welcome to DW and congratulations. Now, we've seen you previously amongst protesters in Stockholm. We saw pictures of you just now. How did the Azeri embassy respond to your demands?
By running away from their embassy. So first they said that, well, we can't see you. So we said we are coming in any case at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And we know that your embassy stays open till 6 in the evening, to which they said, well, we are closing much before that. And when we open and when we close is our business and our business alone. So we went, nevertheless. We went and tried to give them a kind of a protest letter. So either they were there and didn't open the door, or they had abandoned their office to avoid meeting us. But it was a simple act, really. They didn't have reacted the way they did. It was a simple democratic act of handing over a protest letter and asking them to please allow her to come for the ceremony tomorrow, which they could have done.
Tell us about this award, the Right Livelihood Award. What is its significance? I wonder, who pays attention to it?
Well, I think a lot of people in the world and a lot of people in my country pay attention to it. So when it was announced, I did receive a number of calls and letters from people right across India. And it's perceived not just as an award to a particular organization or a particular person. It's seen as an act of solidarity and encouragement for people who struggle to protect the human rights of the poor and to expand the human rights of the working people. And so in that sense, all of us who struggle unitedly against the system of restriction of human rights, which has developed in India over the last 1 year very acutely. We see it as a kind of a nudge, an act of solidarity, and a kind act of support for those who struggle under very difficult circumstances in India.
Well, let us talk about the award that you received. The award jury said that you have secured fundamental rights for India's most vulnerable citizens. To many outside India, the world's largest democracy, it might seem odd that people like you are necessary. Perhaps you could tell us a bit about your work.
Well, you know, India is seemingly a democratic country, and people in the West feel that India is an ideal democracy with a free press, functioning parliament and a functioning judiciary. But if you follow India's developments, particularly over the last 3 years, India is a country with massive human rights violations. For example, there's a case in the Supreme Court of the disappearances and extrajudicial execution of 1,500 people from one state. On the economic rights front, 70% of India is below a poverty line of $2 a day. Can you imagine 750 million people going to bed hungry? So India has all the appearances of a democratic country, but we in India use the term Maya or illusion, which is that you appear like a democratic country, but terrible human rights violations take place.
And please forgive me for interrupting you. Against the background that you have described there, what is it that you do?
Well, we are a band of lawyers, some 200 strong in the country, who use the Constitution, and the Indian Constitution has been interpreted in a very unique way to allow for public interest litigation or a very vibrant class of class action petitions, where you can file a case, where anyone can file a case on behalf of 1,000 people, 10,000 people, or like in the right to food case on behalf of 350 million people for their fundamental right to food, housing, healthcare, and education. So it's a very vibrant tool, and the Indian Supreme Court has come up with perhaps 1,000 judgments against the state, forcing the state to spend billions of dollars in enforcing fundamental rights.
Well, congratulations again on winning the Right Livelihood Award. Colin Gonsalves, thank you so much for joining us here at DW. The award is actually given tomorrow, and DW will be following that throughout the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now, rival Palestinian groups Fatah and Hamas say they've agreed to postpone the handover of power in the Gaza Strip until the 10th of December. The transfer was originally scheduled for tomorrow, Friday, as part of a reconciliation deal aimed at ending a decade of hostility between Hamas and President Mahmoud Abbas's Fatah movement, which runs the West Bank. Palestinians living in Gaza have had to endure years of hardship and are hoping for better times. Like the two young women you're about to meet who yearn to get out and experience the world beyond Gaza's borders.
Asma and Saja Khaldi are 20 and from Gaza. It's a beautiful day and the twin sisters are heading out to make another video.
The perfect thing is...
On YouTube, they're known as the Khaldi twins.
Hey everyone, a new video, new adventure. Good morning.
Culture, people, food, traditions. Their subjects are diverse, their mood always positive. A dedication to making the world a better place.
Stay tuned, follow us.
And considering how depressing life is here, it could come across as naive. Or as propaganda for the radical Islamist group Hamas, which until now has governed the territory. But that would miss the point entirely. Asma and Saja are well aware how hopeless life can feel on the poverty-stricken strip of coast. And how much it can stink, literally. The local electricity crisis means sewage here flows directly into the sea.
Because being in Gaza for 20 years without leaving, you yourself had enough from all that bad news, all that wars. You yourself is searching for escape for yourself first and then for others. Yeah. And that's how our YouTube channel was standing for that thing.
And to encourage more people, more women here in Gaza to take this step and to go on.
For whatever her dream was. Hello, Mexico.
Their dream is to ride along the beach. What might seem simple is a pretty crazy idea for women in Gaza's macho Islamist society. Asma and Saja are studying architecture. Their father is a university professor. Education is a recurring theme on their channel. They emphasize its importance, especially for women. And like many young women, they love shopping too. But it's worth noting that their family is both well off and not involved in politics at all. That said, the twins blame Israeli politics for the squalor in Gaza. And they accuse the Palestinian Hamas and Fatah groups of expediency and a lack of interest in the widespread suffering. In their Port of Gaza video, they simply have to feature this photography exhibition. There are 1,000 photos on display, documenting life in the 10 years since Hamas seized power and Israel imposed its blockade. It's called 1,000 Smiles and 1,000 Tears of Those Dreaming of Freedom. The twins like the title, because although they might appear to be extremely positive, they are only too aware how closely linked joy and sadness are. They're still haunted by these images. The most recent war in Gaza was in the summer of 2014. Asma and Saja had just finished school. The long, carefree summer months lay ahead. But then came the bombs. A life lived in constant fear traumatized them.
Actually, this war for me was a point. a turning point in my life. I was always carrying a philosophy or an idea to join the journalistic school, but after that war I gave up for that idea because I myself had enough, and I cannot keep telling just these bad news.
Photographer Fadi Tabed is a kindred spirit for them. He too is an irrepressible optimist, determined to find beauty in the darkest of experiences. The three are convinced that, at least when it comes to art, the struggle for survival is a gift. It nurtures creativity.
But what an effort. I can cherish that. I'm really happy for him, actually.
You're inspired now?
Yeah, I'm very inspired to pursue my photography project, actually.
Despite their apparent extroverted nature, particularly Asma's, the two young women regularly take time out to meditate. It's a way of focusing inwards and away from what is happening around them.
To travel to visit the West Bank cities and the cities around the world and make videos from there.
Until that becomes possible, they'll keep sending their videos about Gaza out into the world.
Now, free movement of cattle is becoming a flashpoint issue in East Africa. Helen has more.
Yes, that's right. It can have very serious consequences when people will fight over land, of course, when cattle are a lifeline. And diplomatic tensions between Kenya and Tanzania are threatening to flare up over pastures for cattle belonging to the Maasai people who live on both sides of the border. Tanzanian President John Magufuli is keen to implement a livestock ban, saying his country is not a grazing land for the neighbouring country's cows. And the struggle for regional power is being felt in the daily lives of East Africans.
Mary Matia is a worried woman. The Tanzanian widow and mother of one took a business risk that has left her devastated. In early November, her day-old chicks were burned alive by her country's authorities in Namanga, a town on the border between Kenya and Tanzania.
I thought I'd try out the poultry business, so I took out a loan of about €3,800. I bought the chicks in Kenya to sell them here in Arusha. But when I got to the Kenya-Tanzania border point in Namanga, they said the chicks had to be destroyed because they could have bird flu. All 6,400 of them were killed.
Communities living in East African border towns usually move freely from one country to another. Some families even split their time between two countries. Mary thought this was an asset for her new business. Tanzania banned the importation of livestock from neighboring countries in 2007. This year, it's had an extra push. In November alone, Magufuli's government confiscated 11,300 cattle from Kenyan, Ugandan and Rwandan herders, auctioning them for as little as €30 each. We head to a livestock market on the Kenyan side of the border. Of the traders who manage to make it to the market, it's the Tanzanians who end up making the most money. Their cows are cheaper and seem healthier.
The residents here say that on a normal market day, you wouldn't even find space to stand in this enclosure. But the recent spat between Kenya and Tanzania seems to have obviously affected business here in Bisil, near the Kenya-Tanzania border.
There's a lot of pressure on Kenyan traders. Most are dealing with a severe drought. And now that they can't trade in Tanzania, they're beginning to get agitated.
We depend on these cows for everything. If trading with Tanzania is going to be difficult, then we'll take matters into our own hands. If this issue is not resolved, then we'll block the Tanzanians from entering Kenya. Magufuli's rules are very stupid.
Kenya has since written a protest note to Tanzania through the East African community, but President Magufuli seems undeterred, insisting rules are rules. However, these rules are greatly affecting business and lives of those at the grassroots level.
The Australian government is bowing to pressure to crack down on banks behaving badly. Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull says an independent inquiry will help restore confidence in the sector following a string of scandals.
Australia's banks stand accused of providing misleading financial advice, avoiding life insurance payouts by using outdated medical definitions, as well as rate rigging, and failing to follow anti-money laundering rules. Now Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull is heeding calls by other parties, as well as members of his own government, to start an official inquiry.
Good morning. Australians deserve and expect the highest levels of service and accountability. And for the vast majority, that's exactly what they receive. Since the financial crisis, however, there have been examples of misconduct by financial institutions, some of them extremely serious, and that's demanded a response from the institutions themselves and from government.
Australian Treasurer Scott Morrison wanted to dissipate any fears about an inquiry by sending investors a positive message.
Australia's banks are unquestionably strong. Nothing that we've announced today changes this or gives any reason to question this on the part of the government.
The investigation will take about a year's time. Banks across the globe have been handed ever tougher regulations. Perhaps in Australia those rules weren't tough enough.
Now, what goes up must come down, and with bitcoins, it seems to have happened sooner rather than later. After reaching an all-time high of almost $11,500 on Wednesday, the cryptocurrency dropped to under $8,000 today. So that means if you bought bitcoins at the top of the market, thinking the sky's the limit, you've already lost at least 30% of your investment. It is, of course, one of the most volatile currencies out there, but it could still rebound. It all depends on your nerves. Well, if you rode the Bitcoin wave at the right moment, you might have been able to afford this next item, Phil.
Thank you. Yes, Britain's Queen Victoria, probably one of the world's most recognisable historical figures, a woman who shaped an entire era. Now, a scrapbook album containing personal mementos from her childhood has just gone under the hammer here in Berlin. It dates back to 1841 and sold for €37,500. The identity of the buyer has not been revealed.
Known as one of the sternest monarchs in history, Queen Victoria reigned over Great Britain and its empire for 63 years, until her death in 1901. The scrapbook auctioned in Berlin was compiled by her German governess, Baroness Lietzen. Covering Victoria's childhood, teenage years and marriage to Prince Albert, the album includes locks of hair, dried flowers, drawings and photographs.
It's a reflection of a very close relationship. You see it in the hair from Victoria as a toddler. You see it in the piece of her wedding dress, worn during her wedding to Prince Albert. And you see it in the correspondence and letters, and in the masterful pictures made by the young Victoria.
Of particular interest to historians is the memorabilia relating to the young Victoria's marriage to Prince Albert of Saxony in 1840. This week, of course, another royal engagement between Harry and Meghan has been making headlines.
Queen Victoria is a legend. Prince Harry is still to become one. His engagement is exciting for our time, but what I'm holding here is a piece of cultural history.
It is not yet known who bought the items, but the sellers had expressed a wish that Queen Victoria's childhood album returned to England, where it had come from 150 years ago.
British film director Ridley Scott turns 80 today. He's the man responsible for these blockbusting and iconic Hollywood films. And with me now to talk about Ridley Scott is Robin Merrill from our Culture Desk. Welcome, Robin. So what did we have? We had